can you really pay $0 in taxes?
Sure, if you make no money. But your goal should be to A, earn enough money that taxes don't matter, but also understanding taxes a bit better will help you balance that out so it's not a huge cash flow hit. Your financial tools should be a source of inspiration, not intimidation. And you need to listen to what your numbers are trying to tell you.
What's the one question that I should always ask?
I would say...
Welcome to the Wealthy Business Podcast. I'm your host, Javi Chavez, COO of 5, 7 to 8 figure companies with Ryan Pineda. Today, I have somebody who I'm really interested to talk to because we talk a lot about how to grow, how to scale, and personal finance and business finance. And so Shannon, she is a fractional CFO, was part of many Fortune 50 companies, helped them grow. Now she's in Costa Rica, crushing it on her own, is a CPA as well. So I know a lot of entrepreneurs, we really don't focus on the numbers probably as much as we should. So I think this is going to be a super valuable episode. But Shannon, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. So as somebody who has worked in probably some of the best organizations, how's it been now moving into, how big is your organization personally?
Well, we're up to 5 employees and, we're about to cross the 7-figure mark probably next year. So we are, it's growing. I mean, it's only been since 2019. So I consider that pretty quickly. And, but yeah, I'm pulling what I like from my experience in corporate and leaving what I don't like. And there's a lot more leaving than keeping, but we'll leave it at that.
Have you pulled that you do like?
I like the structure. I like methodologies and frameworks that seem to work to enable you to train people and replicate your process really easily. I started my career working at McDonald's actually when I was 14.
Wow.
And there is no better organization to teach you the value of consistency in operations. I know you're a COO yourself, so they are the kings of how to actually create a scalable operation. And I learned so much about business from working there for 6 years, probably more than business school, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, I think if you're able to train 14, 15, 16-year-olds on process, you probably are the best in the industry. So I love that. And what would you leave behind? I'm sure a lot, but...
A lot of cultural aspects, a lot of mentalities, a lot of the communication channels, the outdated ways of interacting with each other and with clients, like having to email everything passive aggressively per my last email, CC your boss. It feels so childish now, high school cafeteria wise, coming out of it and going, God, we were just part of this overall system that was very mean girlsy when you look back at it.
Oh, totally. I've worked in organizations where, like you mentioned, it's very, very passive aggressive. No one's really happy to be there, and it's a rough environment. So how have you shifted that in your own work culture?
Yeah, I mean, I've consciously tried to create an environment that was really supportive. And actually, I have an example of what happened once when I had a team member. I reached out to her and I said, so when do you think you can get this done? Do you think you can get this done by Friday? And what I failed to realize was she also came from public accounting. And not to knock public accounting, but there's a whole language associated with that where a partner says to you, can you get this done by Friday? That was not a question.
For sure. Yeah. I'm guilty of that.
Right. It was not a question. Yeah. It had a question mark on it, but it really wasn't meant to have a yes or no answer. It was just kind of, okay. So I failed to realize that a lot of people interpret it as not a question, but I genuinely am going, is it reasonable? What is a reasonable timeline for you to get this done so I can set proper expectations with the client? But without saying that, I said, so when do you think you can get this done? And they're like, tonight, absolutely, can get it done. I'll stay up till midnight. I'll do what I have to do. And I'm like, whoa, the trauma's coming back. Okay, hold on. I actually meant to ask a question. And I realized that there's a cultural assumption when you have all that background with corporate that that's the way you've always been spoken to or how you interpret the language. So I actually had to do a lot of I guess it's unprogramming. And in starting my own business, had to realize that language matters and that there are certain assumptions about what you're saying without saying it.
Totally. And, efficient communication isn't always effective communication. And that's something that, for me, I'm very short sometimes via text where
Same.
I'm like, hey, sounds good or whatever.
Yeah.
And
yes, no, okay, thanks.
Totally.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people because I would consider us a startup, right? We have we're almost close to 100 employees across all of our different brands. But the majority of the people don't have like the true corporate experience. Like a few of our like leadership team does, et cetera. But so for a lot of people, like the short communication style is fine and it works. But I brought somebody in as a COO of like, so basically the way it works, I'm the COO of our parent company. Then we have COOs at each individual business unit. But I brought somebody in from corporate, and like she asked me like, is everything okay? Like, am I still in good standing? I was like, yeah, we are. I promise we are so good. But like, I recognize that I have to be a lot more clear and transparent with my communication. Otherwise, it can definitely be misconstrued. So, like, are there any practices that you use to make sure that you're providing as much context and, for lack of a better word, fluffing it up a little?
Yeah, I realize that I'm just better verbally because I can get tonality. Like sarcasm doesn't translate without the sound of it. So I have to, and I'm a very dry, sarcastic person, and I don't take things too seriously. Like I have high standards, but I also have empathy and meet people where they're at, right? I want to challenge them. There's that balance of everything. Like you want to be everything to everybody. You want to be that person who challenges them, but nurtures them. And it's hard to balance that. So I would say voice notes. I always send voice notes saying like, hey, quick question. Like if I sent it the way that I said it, I would have like, was it resting bee message? It's like, whoa, okay. And the tone would totally get misconstrued. But when I send voice notes, I feel like I can kind of be softer. I can add nuance. I can add tonality, and I'm just stronger in that sense. So I'd send voice notes and then I allow them to transcribe it. We use Slack a lot. We use other messengers. So that's been helpful in just knowing like where my strengths are so that I don't damage the culture of the team because of a habit I've carried over from corporate.
Yeah. And how did you understand what your strengths were in communication? When did that click?
I think, well, it clicks when it's you know where the boundaries are when you hit them. And you know where, it's like when you're drinking in college. It's like, well, now we know that. Like now we know where that line is.
And hopefully we learn.
And we learn and we don't cross that again, right? But like you only know where the boundaries are when you approach them. And I think that I had to get the feedback in real time from team members going like, hey, or even clients that were like, you're really cold when you send an email. And I go, I'm so sorry. I've been deposed in front of the SEC and I've had my laptop taken and scrubbed. So I write every email like it's going to be read in court because it has. Wow. And I go, because I've experienced that when I was 23, I am forever going to write emails as though it will be read in front of the president of the United States and I have to defend it.
That's so smart.
Yeah, but I have that lawyer mentality in a sense. So people who are creatives, who are my clients, who are maybe like that softer, more empathetic, they're like, you are so cold. And I say, I'm not cold. I'm really just like trying to protect myself because I'm scared. And I realized that that's where I had to, but they gave me that feedback and they would tell me, hey, like, for what it's worth, you have a very different feel for your emails versus your, phone calls. We constantly think you're mad at us. And I was like, okay, noted. I have to really unpack why and take that feedback, which I'm so grateful that my clients are willing to be real with me and tell me that.
Totally. And that's the same thing with me. Like I naturally am like a little warmer, more personable, but I also have to make a point to go do it, right? Because there's some times where like as a COO in the office, I have eyes on me all the time. Right. So if I show up just a little different than I did yesterday, or, maybe I was warm one time and now like I'm just a lot more transactional, like, is everything good? Is everything okay? So I know that I consciously always have to show up this like the same way, be consistent. Otherwise, we can run into issues. But tell me about getting to court at 23. we kind of just glazed over that.
I know. That's the... Oh,
you wonder why? I don't know.
You wonder why I leave my job, right? So, no. So, like in a nutshell, what happened was I worked at a very big company, Big Four firm, and what happened was we were getting inspected. So there's this organization, the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, because they love to make this long. Can't make it quick to say. So, the oversight board would come in and basically audit us auditors. So if we audit financial statements and make sure they're sound and they're valid for our clients, these guys audit us to make sure we're doing a good job. So if you think about like the Sam Bankman-Frieds and the Enrons and all the stuff that went south, it's basically the people who regulate us as auditors to be like, are you guys doing a good enough job to catch fraud and to evaluate these companies? So we get evaluated, we get inspected every year. And this particular job that was getting inspected I was on, And the team above me, managers and above, weren't exactly thrilled with the quality of the documentation. They were new. They realized like, oh, there's so much we learned after that we should have done differently. I mean, we all feel that way about everything we do. Hindsight's 2020, and we go, oh, what were we thinking last year? We got to do this better. And what happened was they went back and modified and adjusted the work papers. There was a possible even incident of someone forging my signature or adding things to documentation that I didn't do.
Oh my gosh.
And my name was on all the stuff. So I ended up getting a phone call from the general counsel in New York, and it was like, I need you to report to the 47th floor immediately. Bring your laptop. Do not talk to anyone. And I was like, what? And I was 23. I was like, what? I'm in training. No. Like, I felt like a kid there with their juice box. And I was like, what's happening? I was a brand new baby. And I just got my license. And I was like, okay. And then I walk in and I see my manager, my senior manager, and partner all like in tears, not talking to anybody. Empty desks, just crying. And I was like, what's happening? Oh, man. And it didn't even occur to me until months later. This was a 9-month process. And they took my laptop. I had to go into DC. I had a lawyer assigned to me. I had to be trained on how to answer questions because somebody whistle blew that they had done that. And it was very wrong. It was a very unethical thing to do. But it was a very interesting experience to be exposed to very young, because you realize like what the risks really are if you cut corners. And the irony of the whole situation was, after they had done that and tried to cheat on the inspection, they actually went back and did the inspection. They would have passed with flying colors had they done nothing.
Wow.
Had they just let it be. So chasing perfection does not get you what you want. This is like a whole fable of a lesson for me, where it's like, good enough is good enough, move on.
Yeah. And you just gave like 3 different lessons, but what do you feel like was your biggest takeaway from that entire experience? That
watch what you email. No, I'm kidding. Don't let someone read your IMs. Oh my God, the IM emojis, they probably read in my laptop. I so cringe. No, but I was 22, guys. Yeah. But but honestly, the lesson learned is don't chase perfection, because there's a big cost for perfection that's not worth it. And then also, it's not worth cutting corners. Nothing is worth cutting the corners for, because if you have to, then it's probably not in the right way.
Totally. Yeah. And that's the thing, a lot of people get into business and they feel like they need to, for lack of a better word, put on a facade or feel like everything's perfect. And then they start fluffing numbers here, fluffing numbers there. And, you can get into some deep trouble. So,
ego's a devil, man.
I know.
Ego's awful. It'll drive all these decisions, all these things, this pride, this ego. It's like, for what? What is this for? So you can go ahead and say you got an A+. Like, what is it for,
Totally. And then that bleeds into like the corporate culture too, where like we talked about earlier, if people are afraid to make mistakes, and then if you are cold in an email or whatever, and then now they're thinking, shoot, well, if I mess up, like I might lose my job, and you have to make it you got to create a safe space for some people.
Yeah, a safe space, but also like, you have to create a safe space where people feel like they can admit when they make a mistake, because the last thing you want to do is have them hide it and try to bury it. We all know every single sitcom, isn't that the whole theme and the whole plot of every episode of a sitcom is like the kid got in trouble, try to hide it, and then like it was worse because they weren't forthcoming. But if they were forthcoming, the episode would have been 8 minutes long. So I get it.
I mean, it makes for better TV, and it makes for better, court cases, I'm sure.
True.
So now, as somebody, like, this is going to get into like kind of tactical stuff now, like as somebody who's starting out, like why do I need a fractional CFO versus just having a like QuickBooks and my P&L?
Well, I mean, you need everything. You need QuickBooks in your P&L when you start, for sure. But that's having the data. So the first step of anything is just getting access to the data and knowing where to find it. I equate it to going to your doctor and getting your blood work done, knowing where you stand, knowing what the numbers are when they're sitting there. The difference, though, is having somebody on your team, and that could be called a fractional CFO. It could be called a tax strategist, an advisor. I can get into like the different labels for these people, but basically, you need to have somebody who is of the right expertise and understands your business to help you translate what's on that paper into what you need to go do about it. So with blood work in particular, I bring that up because I went and got my blood work done this year. I looked at the numbers and I go, what the F is this even saying? Because I just see like 2.8. Is that good? What's good? And I go, and then I went, you know what? This is how my clients feel. Because I said, you know what? They don't know what's good. What should I be striving for? I see these numbers. It's like weighing yourself and going, what do I want to be? And going, I see these numbers, they're neutral. what should I do with this information? And then that's how I explain what we do is we turn those data into decisions. We say, okay, this is what the numbers are telling you. Do you like that story, that narrative, or do you not like it? How can we change it? What would you like to do to move toward your goals in your business or personally? How can we help you do that? So it's bridging that gap between the data and the numbers and knowing what they are to knowing what to do with them. That's how I would describe it.
And how long does it typically, like how much data do I need to have before you're able to make a good decision?
It depends on the decision. So like, I'll use an example. Someone says, Shannon, I want to hire somebody. I want to hire an operations manager for my business. It's okay. Great. What do you think they're going to cost you? Where are they going to be based? Are they virtual? How much salary would they command? Are they part-time, full-time? All the technical operational questions, right? So assuming you know all those answers, we say, okay, we need to carve out, $2,000 to $3,000 a month to hire this person on contract on like a fractional basis. Okay, cool. So based on that, I would put it into as a cash flow forecast and say, okay, if we put this into your cash flow and we add this into your expenses, into your burn, what is that going to do to your cash reserve? What is that going to do to your profitability? What is that going to do for the timeline it will take you to reach your goal? So like if your goal was to bring home X dollars a month in profit, it's going to take you another month to get to that point. Are you okay with that? Things like that to say, what is our reality going to look like if we add this person into our team? If we take someone out of the team, if we pay someone more, so-and-so's asking for a raise. Can we kind of put that on the whiteboard and say, what's going to happen if I say yes to this? Or how can we rework commissions to make sure our margins are the same? We're not losing money. We're not pouring water into a hole or a bucket with holes in it. So that's the type of stuff that it depends on the decision you want to make, but we start with the questions the founder has and say, how can we answer them with the numbers? Because if you look at, it's so overwhelming. If I say, look at your P&L balance sheet and cash flow statement every single month, then you're going to read them. Great. Yeah. But you won't know, won't know what to pull out of them. It's like going to Target without a shopping list. You're going to walk in, wander aimlessly, walk out forgetting what you came in for, and spending a bunch of money and time. So I say you have to go in with the shopping list of, this month, I would really like to know A, B, and C. And then that is where we can say, okay, if you want to learn this is where you want to look. Like, am I profitable? I want you to look at your gross profit, divide that by your sales to get your gross margin. And I want you to look at your net profit, divide that by sales and get your net margin. And I want you to compare that to last month and compare that to last quarter and last year. That's going to help me a ton in kind of concluding where you're heading. But everything will be a very specific zoom in so that it's not overwhelming.
That's so good. And I feel like a lot of the people who listen to this podcast, they probably don't even look at their QuickBooks anyway. So, I think it's so beneficial to have this side of it, because the sooner, for us personally, when we got started and when I even moved into the COO role, sorry, Ryan, but we really didn't have a ton of insight into where this revenue was coming from, where we were bleeding cash. We had so many different subscriptions and all this other stuff and because good times really mask a lot of issues. And we're so blessed that we have such a great sales and marketing engine that we're able to get by probably a lot easier than a lot of other companies are. So, when you are coming into a business, how do you effectively and again, I know it's such a broad question, but I'm asking for me personally, how do you come in and stop the bleeding and stop where do you start essentially?
Yeah. Well, I start with the business owner's perception because it's not always correct by the facts. So it's kind of, how are you feeling? I feel like we're bleeding cash. Okay. I can't deny their feelings. Their feelings are valid. Their feelings are facts that they feel that way. Yeah. But I said, okay, how do you feel? What is causing you to reach out to me? Right. There's usually some type of thing that happens. They pick up the phone and say, okay, Shannon, finally, I need you. So it's either a big tax bill or something happens, right? So it's usually something's on their mind that they want to settle, and we want to get a quick win on a particular area of the business to close it up. But if I'm looking overall, I look at, how do you feel the business is going? Do you feel like you're growing? Do you feel like you're at the pace you want to be at? Because that informs a lot. And I think that not enough accountants start with, how do you feel? because that you have to reconcile that with the facts. Because if you're telling someone what the numbers are saying and they don't feel that way, they're going to resist you. So you have to create this like connection between how you feel and what's actually happening, and they understand how to connect those two things. So there's that piece of it. But I would actually look at holistically at core profitability, cash flow, all the things that are tactically what you should be looking at. But I really have to focus on the unique goals of the founder and say, what are you trying to accomplish with this business? Is this something you want to grow and scale? Do you want to use this as a job to cash flow your lifestyle? And, or do you want to use it to create money to invest in real estate, create money to invest in your retirement, create money to send your kids to private school, whatever that may look like? And what does success look like to you? So I know that we're not all chasing the same goals. It's very much like a health journey. It's like, are you trying to climb Mount Everest, do an Ironman, or just like finish a 5K? Like all of those are successful, but I want to know where they're at.
So what are you trying to do with your business?
That's a great question. I'm actually, so my favorite thing about my business is that it's not a traditional accounting firm. I proudly have only 12 clients. And I love that because I get to go deeper with them. So what I'm trying to do with my business is turn the typical accounting model on its head and say, this can work too, by going deeper with less people as opposed to surface level with a ton of people. Because a lot of accounting firms are very transactional. They will do the tax paperwork, the bookkeeping, and they will do it for hundreds of business owners and just get the tasks done. But I said, well, what if I just did everything for the business? And I did everything they need and was that resource for them and went deep and not wide. So that's what I want to do functionally. But how I want to build my business is where I can spend the time I want to and have that choice. I love what I do. I don't want to just own the business and hire a GM to manage it. I want to be part of it. I want to do my podcast. It's my favorite thing I do. It's called Keep What You Earn, my favorite part. And I want to teach. I want to have an outlet to be able to teach people more about money and empower them. And in order to do that, I have to generate the cash flow from the business to hire an amazing team. But that is what success looks like to me, is really running a business that I could package up. I could maybe even sell the method one day on how we do it, but to be determined. Right now, it's a really fun way to make an impact.
That's great. And so by going deep, do you plan on bringing on more clients, or are you just really happy just kind of sticking with your 12 and, there's just no ambition to grow how much bigger?
Oh, we have ambition to grow, but it's we have ambition to grow. But what I'm saying is, I have a 12 client capacity. I'm not at that capacity yet, but
I see.
I'm at about 8 now. Okay. So we have room for more, but that is the point at which I would have to hire another person. So I would have to hire another CFO to help me or another team member. And when we get to that point, which would be amazing, we will cross that bridge when we get there and hire someone. But I love having a small team. I do not want to have a 50-person CFO operation. I just picture these tables of all these people working, and I just don't want to create what I used to work in. I don't want to create an environment where people are pressured to work late or where it becomes transactional. That's really important to me, to keep it personal, keep it intimate with the clients. That's really the most important thing. And if we can find a way to do that while also growing, that's optimal.
Love it. So how do you keep it personal with your employees? I know we talked about it a little bit, but I know you're in Costa Rica. I'm sure your team are they all throughout the U.S. or where are they based?
Yeah, they're scattered all throughout the U.S.
Mm-hmm. So how do you keep it personal with them?
Keep it personal. I would say a lot of our conversations, our check-ins that we have are not just business. We get down to business. We get through what we need to. My favorite, I have 3 questions I always ask in every team meeting, which is, what should we do more of? What should we do less of? And what's getting in your way? That's it. Anything you need, you can get from those 3 questions. Anything you need to know to action. So I really focus on that with a team meeting, but then we get into just life updates. How are things going? I'm not one for the virtual happy hours or coffee. No. I just can't. I can't.
Me neither.
But no, and I would love to host everyone to come down here and have in-person meetings. That's a big goal for us in 2024 is having more in-person interactions with the team. Several of them are new, starting in September. So we're on our way to really. Last month, I just had my first all hands team meeting. Everybody was in silos for so long, working on marketing or ops, and then now we're a full-blown team who have my company on their LinkedIn profile, which is kind of surreal. That's kind of a really interesting cool. mile marker to be like, somebody has my company on their LinkedIn resume. That's pretty cool.
That's so, yeah. I think that's like a big accomplishment because I feel like there are moments when you're in business where it starts to feel real, right? You know, you might like cut your first check, or, you know, you might get your first client, and, you know, the first LinkedIn nod is pretty sweet too. And I mean, I worked for a company. We were 1,000 people, 100% remote, and it was the same thing where we had these virtual happy hours and these virtual coffee things, or like forced networking, and I was like, oh gosh, like I don't want to do it, but like it's figuring out how to foster like a fun, collaborative virtual culture without making it too forced, I guess.
Yeah, it's really hard to force conversation, but I think that when you create an environment where people can talk to each other and have reasons to interact with each other, those conversations will naturally flow. And I think if you also recruit the people who have the right values, and you're recruiting the right people into your team, the conversations will naturally flow because people will find commonalities. People will find things that will connect them naturally and start those conversations without you. I think when you try to force those conversations is when it comes across as forced and fabricated. I think you just have to let the relationships happen and be willing to I guess, embrace that it's going to take some time for people to get to know each other and open up.
Totally. And you mentioned core values. That's something that, because when we do our presentations with some of our entrepreneurs and everybody, like every time I bring up core values, everyone kind of rolls their eyes, or they're like, oh, dude, like this is corny, or whatever it might be. But truly, when you have people who do embody your core values, and when you've clearly defined your core values, it makes a world of a difference. Because what I've seen is, like, if you don't define the core values, your employees are going to do it for you. So like you need to have something that is clearly laid out, and like we have them on the wall. Like we put them up. We make sure, and it's not like the Pledge of Allegiance or anything. But you know,
is there a picture of a lion with a big word?
Yeah. There's a big lion and like one big thing. No, I mean
integrity.
Yeah. Yeah, like a big mountain range. And then it says perseverance.
Yeah.
No, but it's train daily, play fair, no ego, and serve others. Right? Like if we don't have people who if they don't meet that in the interview process, we're not bringing them on board. And then one of Ryan's favorite quotes is, we're not a family, we're a team. I think we're somewhere in the middle. But what I mean by that is, we do evaluate our employees on like a quarterly basis, right? They know it too, but it's like, hey, are they still embodying our core values? Because, sometimes people fall out of alignment for whatever reason, and that's okay. We've had people who their goals just didn't line up anymore, right? We teach financial freedom. We teach how to build wealth through real estate. So sometimes it's only natural that some of our employees follow our playbook and they kind of leave their 9 to 5 to go do their thing, and we wish them the best. So it happens a lot. But, we just need to make, so in your business, what's your recruiting process like?
Oh, I love my process, and I have a phenomenal fractional HR rep who has taught me how to do this. And it really comes down to identifying the core competencies of a role, but also the core traits you want the person to have. And it's not about like demographic data or they need to have a certain personality type or something like that and narrowing your focus. It's more about, and some of mine were, I need them to be a lifelong learner. I need them to embrace curiosity and growth through knowledge, like never feeling like they know enough and always seeking out on their own something new they can do. That is a really big, important thing for me, to have that attitude. Because I think attitude is always the first thing. Is if you are a lifelong learner, I can teach you anything. As long as you are asking thoughtful questions, I can teach you anything. You don't have to come to the table with a ton of tax knowledge in order to thrive in a CPA firm. You have to have an open mind and an ability to learn. And that is really what I realized the core skill set, the real core competency was ability to learn quickly on the fly and to seek out that new knowledge. Sidebar, I have a friend who specifically is a CPA for spicy businesses. So we're talking about like exotic dancers and stars, folks that you probably know in Vegas or
don't know them too well, but
right.
Otherwise we're in trouble. But yeah, I know
they're around. But here's the funny thing is that she actually, we were there in Vegas when I was there with Ryan. I actually got to chat with her, and funny thing is that she has a team that is all musicians. They do tax returns, but they're all like trumpet and guitar players and, musicians. And I said, how did that work out? And she said, believe it or not, somehow the skill in learning a new instrument and the practice of that and the repetition makes them really good learners. And you can teach them a rule and they will apply it. And I was like, who knew? So it really doesn't have to be in the exact science that you're in, but knowing that there are going to be people who are the right fit for your company culturally, but you can teach the skill set too. I think we turn that on its head too often, where we try to find somebody who's pre-packaged and like all ready to go, but then they usually aren't a cultural fit. There's always this kind of trade-off between the two things. I always look for attitude first and say, I can teach you the stuff later as long as you want to learn.
Totally. I think that's so impactful. And whenever I think about like our recruiting process and when we did turn it on its head and we had somebody who might have had all the right skills on paper and then we brought them in and they just didn't work out. And it wasn't because they didn't do their job effectively, but because they weren't a culture fit, they knew they weren't a culture fit, probably whether it was subconsciously or consciously, their work performance went down too. So we didn't even get the best performance out of all their skills that they had because they weren't a culture fit in the beginning. So I agree with that. It's like, yeah, can I trust you? And are you a culture fit? I think are the two biggest things that we look into. I call it like the vibe check, right? Like every time that we're just like, are we on the same wavelength here before we actually, pull the trigger and get together? So when somebody's evaluating their CPA firm, what should they be looking for, right? Because there's a ton of people out there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I actually have an entire list of questions and a whole guide on like how to evaluate your CPA. Not only interview someone, because this is somebody who's going to see you financially naked, guys. Like you gotta give a what about who's going to do that. Like you can't just be your uncle's friend or the guy down the street, or they did my mom's forever, so they must be good, right? No, when you're a business owner, especially if you're in real estate, especially if you're focused in a particular industry, find somebody who knows your stuff and can really help you thrive and grow, not just can do the bare minimum compliance, right? So I would say that, but also asking questions like, and this will save you a ton of time and money. If you can ask, what is the preferred way to communicate with you and the expected turnaround? Write that down, what they say. But also, will I be working with you or one of your associates? Who should I be interacting with on a daily basis? And can I meet them? Can I talk to another client of yours who works with that team member? Can I talk to another client of yours of a similar size and stage as me to get feedback? And believe it or not, the answer you want is not just a name and phone number. The answer you want is yes. If the answer is no,
why?
So it's more telling how they respond to that question. You go, well, maybe. And you go, okay. And then you also want to understand who you're going to be interacting with, how they uniquely serve your industry, your niche, or people like you. Tell me about success stories of clients just like me that you've served. What's your most recent success story with a client? What are you the most proud of accomplishing with your clients? And here's the funny thing. Nobody asks them those questions. Nobody would ask me those questions. And if you ask those questions, they should be able to answer them. And it's a really interesting thought process to go through if they can't answer that. But also, other things like, how do you maintain your education? How do you stay updated on current tax laws? You really have to then cater the questions to what it is you want out of that relationship. Kind of like dating, honestly. It's like, what can I expect if I spend time with you? How often are we going to meet? When are you going to respond to my text messages? Imagine if we could go on first dates and we could be like, what is your average text message turnaround so I don't sit by the phone in agony?
Yeah. What's your preferred Sunday? Like, I love it.
Yeah.
And so when interviewing, when you're looking into like how to pick your person, right? What else should what's the one question that I should always ask?
I would say, there's one question you get asked to pick that person. I would say, I really think it's their question. You have to listen for their questions.
Love it.
So I would say if there was one thing I could do, if you didn't know what to ask them, I would ask, what questions do you have about my business? Because if nothing, I think we're good. It's kind of like going to that job interview and then the interviewee saying, nope, no questions. And it's like, Did you look me up? Did you do any research? Do you have any opinion on working with me or not? Or am I just a warm body in a chair that you're going to say yes to? You know what I mean? So you want to feel like it's customized to you. So I would kind of say, what questions do you have about my business that I can help answer? And listen for the depth of those questions. And if they are of the similar style that I just listed out, like, what is your preferred communication? How do you prefer to be interacted with? Who's on your team that we need to get to know? Things like that are going to go a long way.
That's perfect. So I have the $1 million question, the one that every YouTube video is about, everything that you Google. Can you really pay $0 in taxes?
Sure, if you make no money. Can you? Yes. Yeah. Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Yes, you can if you make zero.
You can. But that shouldn't be the goal. You want to minimize taxes. I get that. But at the cost of your purchasing power, sometimes at the cost of what? What is the priority and the goal, especially for my real estate people? I think that people get really short-sighted with the tax minimization goal, and then they sacrifice purchasing power without realizing it. I have a former client of mine who, I found out that hadn't been claiming 50 grand in cash that she was collecting from her job or from her work as a contractor, and was only claiming like 40 grand. It was really 90, but it was only claiming 40. Okay, paying taxes on 40. Now, again, that is not okay, by the way. Claim all your income. But it was in the name of, well, I don't have to claim that. Nobody knows about it. And I'm like, you do you make your decisions, but, it is what it is. And then she came back to me a year later and said, and I wasn't working with her at that time. I have to disclaim that. That was not my client at the time. She told me about it later. But she came back to me and said, hey, Shan, I want to put a deposit down on this house. I want to get a mortgage and I want to live in my dream house. Great. Couldn't qualify. And I'm like, and she goes, they said I can't qualify because I don't make enough money. And I said, well, according to this, they're correct. You don't. But I made $90K last year. And I go, problem is you wanted to tell a different story. And you can't change the story based on the reader. You got to publish the story. You don't get to change the book depending on who's reading it. So that was a really big lesson for her, but also something I carried with me to say, I understand the tax minimization goal, but your goal should be to earn enough money that taxes don't matter. And yes, optimize them. I'm not saying pay more taxes than you legally owe, but I'm saying optimize them so it's not really a problem. But also understanding taxes a bit better will help you balance that out so it's not a huge cash flow hit. I think that a lot of people want to pay zero in taxes, but I go, well, it wouldn't be such a painful experience if you were saving a few hundred a month because you knew what the bill was going to be, as opposed to that $20,000 gut punch you feel in April because you only found out by surprise that you owe this much money. I think that's the real pain.
For sure.
As opposed to being able to plan for it. Because my clients who plan for it barely even remember tax season as a thing because they're like, oh, it's fine. I've been saving up for it since last March. I'm good. Yeah. And they know that they're just going to pay that money. It was never theirs to begin with. It's out of sight, out of mind already. And it does not bother them emotionally at all. So they're not hungry for some type of crazy tax strategy because they're like, it's fine. We're optimizing. We're using these strategies. We're using the S Corp, the Augusta rule, the things that we do, the hiring the kids. We hear all about this on TikTok. We do these things for people. Yeah. But we also have to look at how much are you willing to go through to save a few $100? You really have to be spending that time on earning as opposed to, hiding.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head with it's always the people. It's like the kids who don't do their homework until the last minute. They're scrambling. They're trying to copy someone else's test, whatever. But if you just plan for it and it's going to come and it's, again, like you said, it's not your money anyway, according to the government, that's the way it is. And it's so funny because it happens a ton in real estate where, just like you mentioned, people don't document their income or whatever, and then they try to go because number one, they write everything off, right? They and then they're like, oh yeah, I don't make any income, and then they try to go qualify for a big apartment, or they try to qualify for their own primary residence, and they're like, shoot, I made multiple six figures last year, but doesn't look like it. So I think that's
sorry, you're broke, and they're like, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. It's a really tough situation to be in, and I don't want anyone to be in that position. And I am an advocate for minimizing taxes and using the tax code to your advantage. But what people have to realize is that even with deductions, right? If you take a $50,000 deduction, you're really saving a fraction of that, saving maybe 10 grand. at max maybe in taxes, because you're really looking at what is the tax savings on these deductions. It's just a small percentage of them. So I never say spend $1 to save 20 cents.
So good. So lifestyle wise, why Costa Rica? Besides the obvious.
Well, it's the why not Costa Rica, but also there's actually a bit of a story to it, which is really important to share. That my in-laws loved Costa Rica. They went here on a cruise. My husband sent them on a cruise down here. They eventually snowbirded down here in 2019, and we got to come visit them. So it was my first trip, and I love it. I also minored in Spanish. I speak Spanish. I love anything Latin American culture, so I was here for it. And we got back from the trip, and my father-in-law was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So that was the year before COVID. Cut to 2020. He's getting worse, and me and my husband decided, you know what? We're going to buy him a house in Costa Rica. There's these new builds going up in this town we'd never been to, sight unseen. And we said, you know what? Worth it. Because why not? He'll get to live there. We can use it after. We'll Airbnb it. We'll figure it out. And it's in a great location. What's the risk, right? So we did that. The house was supposed to be done in the fall of 2020. My father-in-law passed away over the summer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So, and my dad passed away in 2013 from cancer as well.
Wow.
So my husband and I kind of looked at ourselves and said, look, listen, both of our dads were answering work emails until the day before they died. My dad on a BlackBerry probably, but it was, we looked at them and said, wow, like retirement wasn't guaranteed. All the 401k stuff they were telling us, like putting money away for a rainy day. I go, they never even got to see the rain. They never even got to dip into that after all that effort. And then me and my husband looked at each other and we were like, F that. We have retirement savings. We did not go the extreme, but we said, you know what? What's wrong with living now? We want to eventually retire in Costa Rica. Why the hell not live there now? There's the internet. We can work remotely. We can do what we want to do. We have technology. It's amazing. I have high-speed fiber optic internet down here with the occasional monkey on a bridge power outage. But but overall,
it's a valid trade-off, though, for sure.
Yes. Yeah. But it really is it's an amazing lifestyle down here. And the cultural reason too is because during COVID, nobody had a mask on because there were no windows and doors most places. It's just kind of like beach bars and picnic tables, and we were like. And it was so refreshing because people walk to each other's houses. They say hello. They make eye contact. They say good morning. There are kids playing outside that don't have phones. And it made us realize like how much we miss the simplest things, which is just walking down to the store, saying hello to 3 people on the way, getting honked at by the cab driver who knows you. And like having that experience. And I said, why do we crave this so much? Like, why do we feel like we miss this? And why it made me have a stark contrast. And then getting home to America, I felt the stress in the air. It feels different. So that was actually a real big reason why we've been splitting our time. Is this is kind of a recharge for us to be here.
And how long? And you said you've been there for a few years now?
Yeah, about 3 years now. So we moved here in 2020, and I spent most of 2021 here. Most of the pandemic we spent down here watching the news from another country, which is quite interesting.
Oh, I bet. And do you have kids? Or
we do not.
Any plans?
Hopefully, but to be determined.
Nice. Well, honestly, I can't think of a better place to be with my wife / whoever you're into than Costa Rica, honestly. Just like you mentioned, I think the work culture in the United States, it's great. I mean, we're titans of industry, but it does bleed through to everything. And you really see it when you go to, we were just in Greece for a little while. And same thing, like we were on some of the small islands, and just, you could tell it's just so much more leisurely, so much slower, so much like, it's just a better experience for sure. And I'm jealous of the people who are, doing the digital life. I'm sure I'll get there at some point. I do enjoy the value of being in an office and like building a good community, because I get to be impactful in like a leadership position to like build and foster a good community of people who are working hard, but they're happy to be there. And they're all mission driven and all that kind of stuff. But, there is definitely value in getting some rest and recharge outside of, a very industrious United States.
Yeah, I would say the biggest blessing is having a choice.
Yes.
That we all have the choice that if we want to pursue that, we can. If we want to have an office, we can. if I wanted to rent out an Airbnb for a week somewhere in the United States and call the whole team and say, we're doing a pop-up office, come on in and let's meet in person and just work with each other, I could do that, right? Like there's just so many unbridled options of what you can do. And I think it's the most exciting time to be alive and to be working, in my opinion, because we have so many choices in front of us on how we do it. We don't have to play by anyone else's rules.
100%. So what would you say to somebody who's working in corporate America, similar to yourself, and wants to make the jump? Or like, better question, tell me about that first year and that transition.
Oh yeah. So, okay. So I was working a director job with overseeing a team of 9. So there's context there. So there was a big oh boy, everyone's going to hate me. Sorry guys. But what I realized was, and it was unique to me because I had a tax season coming up where I was quite busy. And I said, I can't do tax season I can't do tax season in the side gig and do a full-time job. I'm going to crash and burn. I was already burning out so bad. I was working 12, 14-hour days. And
so really quick, you already had your side gig on this at this point.
Yes.
Correct?
So I worked until the end of 2021 in a corporate job, and I had started my side gig in 2019. So I was 2 years in balancing both and working crazy hours, and it was a lot. But what I did was I said, I'm going to do a cash flow forecast, literally pulled my accounting toolkit out. And I sat with my husband, who's also an entrepreneur. I sat with my husband and I said, listen, if you let me, like if we both agree, not that I needed my permission, but I said, if you agree that I can quit this job, then, and we have a good amount in savings, we're going to be okay. If you give me 6 months till June to go all in on this, because I'm making this much money working 15 hours a week, 10 hours a week. If I can do 40 or more, like I could kill this, but I need to be able to do that. I'm at a ceiling where the amount of time I can spend, I can only get this much done. So I need to open more time up and I need to quit the job. And I said, if I can't make this happen, this particular financial goal, if I can't hit this revenue target by June, I will get another job, but it ain't this one. But I need that 6 months to prove it. And that was the best thing I could have done because it was basically a low risk deal of a contract with my husband to say, look, I get it. I'm supposed to be the safe source of income because you're the entrepreneur, but I think I can prove that this will work. If you let me go all in and up for 6 months, I'll prove it to you. But it was also such a fire under my butt to get it done because I was like, I need to prove it.
So
that was a big reason.
Yeah. I think a lot of people enter into entrepreneurship with no clear, not a deadline, but no clear target. Right. You said, I'm going to do myself
mission of like a milestone that you're going to hit. Like it's a lot of this open-ended reactive management of the business. And I think that when you have where that peak is going to be, maybe you're climbing Everest, but you're like, I know where the next camp is. That is really helpful because if you set your goals too far and too wide, they'll feel unattainable forever. But you have to be able to set something that's like, in the next 6 months, I'm going to do this. Even the next 6 days, I'm going to do this. You have to just keep it at that incremental 1 step at a time. But always have a vision for where you want to be in a certain number of months and then scale that back to incremental action steps so that you know that you've hit that point and you can celebrate it.
Totally. And was there ever a time in the business where you've had to pivot?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I started doing bookkeeping and tax and I started kind of becoming an order taker. This is one of my biggest lessons in business is that you don't have to be an order taker. You can serve whatever you want on your menu. So what happened was, if you picture like a restaurant, somebody comes into like an Italian restaurant and says, will you make me a cheeseburger? And they're like, well, no, it's not on our menu. It's like, but you have ground beef, cheese, meat, and bread back there. Can you make me a burger? Old Shannon was like, you're right. I do have those ingredients. I can go make that for you. That's fine. And then you realize, oh, but they keep coming back. And they keep asking for that. And it's not on my menu. And I haven't trained my chefs on how to do that. So now I have to do it because I signed us up for this. Oh God. And I'm like, and what you do is when you deviate from the menu of what you want to be doing, it's like I opened an Italian restaurant not because I wanted to make burgers. Yeah. So what I realized was I said, you know what? I have to just stick with the menu and go, this is what we do. I don't have to, it's not some type of value added thing for me to get a yes out of someone. Not everybody is an ideal client. So if somebody says, this is what I'm looking for, I don't have an obligation to offer that. I can say, that is great. I know someone who can do that for you and refer them out to someone else and have an abundant mindset on competition and say, this is a collaborator that can take the work that I don't want to do because it brings them joy and it's on their menu.
Love it.
And I can actually work with them as opposed to feeling like I have to hoard and collect all the clients for myself and do what they want.
Yeah, it's just the difference between a scarcity mindset and the abundance mindset, right? Like,
Absolutely.
And doubling down on what you know you do well, what your menu is. And I'm sure there'll be someone else that's going to take great care of that person. And because we run a media agency here too, where we film, edit, produce people's social media content. And, in the early days, we were the same way, where we would, they want us to make these doodle videos for you. I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it. But then you realize that again, those clients, they keep coming back, or there's always a problem client, or they always have more questions than what if we would have just stuck to our menu. The client would have got a better experience. We would be happier. It's just a better thing all the way around. So that's great. Business lesson for anybody is just double down on what you do well. You don't have to be the person for everybody, because it's just not going to be a good fit for anyone.
Yeah, it's not a mark of a badge of honor for you to say yes to someone or to get a yes from them. You're not chasing the yes, you're chasing that aligned yes where it's really exciting for both of you. And you don't lose if you get a no in a sales call, or you don't lose if it's not an ideal client. Like, you have no obligation to chase a yes in those conversations.
Shannon, if there's one thing that you feel like the world needs to know, and again, I know that's such a broad question, but I like asking everybody it.
Yeah.
What would it be?
Your financial tools should be a source of inspiration, not intimidation. And you need to listen to what your numbers are trying to tell you.
Mic drop. Perfect. Where can people find out more about you?
I would love for you guys to join me over at Keep What You Earn. Our podcast is called Keep What You Earn. You can also go to keepwhatyouearncfo.com to learn about what we do and our services. So I'll see you over at the podcast. Would love to have you.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.